Houston Cougars. A furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to the Scott and One podcast. We are back in this one of the most wonderful times of the college sports calendar preview season with the return of Houston Cougar football, now single-digit number of days away. Ooh, can't get here soon enough. The return of college football in 3 days' time or less as you are listening to the show. We're going to lead tonight with our annual in-depth preview of the Houston Cougar football offense with an exciting new transfer quarterback and, frankly, almost nowhere to go but up. And we also have actual on-field Cougar results to talk about from the still undefeated soccer program, and with an actual Big 12 football game kicking off Saturday morning, we figured no better time than the present to look at what should be an exciting 2025 season in our conference. Bobby, we survived the last weekend of 2025 without football that counts. It is so close to the season that we could taste it. How you doing, friend?
Dude, I had this realization. I'm good, man. But I had this realization like probably 20 minutes ago before we started recording. And I was like, dude, next week we're legitimately previewing a game that counts towards the record. Now, it's versus SFA. We'll get to that next week. But like, dude, it is here. We have actual football on Saturday, man. Like, I'll actually be down in Houston this weekend for some personal stuff, some really fun stuff, and I'm like, oh man, we're out doing stuff all day Saturday. Wait a minute, there's actual football on this Saturday. I'm gonna have to have my phone charged, ready to go. So it's gonna be a really it's here, man. It's here. The dog days of summer are over.
In a fun way, and again, we will get to the SFA preview next week, so I will keep this mercifully brief. I even have a little note in here about the Patreon read that's just like, we got a lot to cover, buddy. Keep it brief. And yet I'm already 1 minute in making an aside. But it almost like the SFA game kind of reminds me of like the first week of college where it's like, okay, like classes are back, but it's just going to be get the syllabus and maybe, like it's a soft launch this season, just like SFA is going to be a soft launch.
Yeah, how your professor gives you that syllabus, and then you have like your baseline like pop quiz, so they know where you're starting out.
Yeah, exactly. So in some ways, I kind of like that. Don't get me wrong, I'm excited that other people are playing meaningful games in the week one slate, but I kind of like that it's a soft launch for us. But we will leave that for next week's episode because we have a lot to talk about tonight. I will take my own note here, keep it brief, but we'll mention here at the top, please go to patreon.com/shpodcast to support the work that Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis, covering the entirety of U of H's sports offering. There are a number of still very current episodes we did over the summer that you get with being a supporter of the show, in addition to just defraying the time and dollar costs that go into what Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis. But no more dilly-dallying, Bobby. Let's get to the football, previewing the Houston Cougar offense. So the good news, the biggest picture good news, I think, is that Conner Weigman and the offense writ large, because, you kind of, as we've learned the last couple seasons, your offense is very quarterback dependent. Like there are, I'm sure, teams out there that can be plug and play, but that has not been the Houston Cougars recently, and it is certainly not going to be us. But the good news is he doesn't really have to be that good. Like the offense this year, relative to our, I think, still, even after not having like a vintage last 7 or 8 seasons of offense with some exceptions, doesn't have to be that good to be a significant upgrade over what we saw last season. I think that's the good thing for everyone that's a new face around here. That's Conner Weigman, whether that's your new offensive coordinator, Slade Nagel. It's a number of, I think, impact transfers that we're excited about. You don't need to be that good to just be like night and day better than what was only fractionally off being the worst scoring offense in all of Division I FBS last season. If you're a fan of a team, you're kind of prone to hyperbole. Like your problems are the worst problems. Nobody has it worse than us, or nobody suffers like us. You will hear And this is the kind of thing that makes my head hurt and makes me irrationally angry. You'll hear you'll hear Ohio State and Longhorn fans be like, oh, well, it's just so tough to be a fan of my team, blah, 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 blah. We lived the 2024 Houston Cougar. Bobby, we have earned some battle scars for watching 12 games of absolutely putrid offense. So, not to get in the mire of a bad season, we're using this preview as a chance to look ahead. But I think that's the good news, because I feel like the biggest historic pitfall with Cougar transfer quarterbacks the last decade or so has been the fact that those transfer quarterbacks have previously all had to follow a very good Cougar quarterback. I think the two biggest examples, Kyle Allen, who, in addition to being miscast by the Applewhite staff, who apparently had no idea he wasn't a mobile quarterback, was the fact they had to follow Greg Ward Jr., a beloved quarterback who won a bunch of big games. Anybody would have had a hard time following Greg Ward. And then 2 seasons ago, Donovan Smith coming in, having to follow Clayton Tune, a quarterback who certainly by his final season had convinced us in this fan base that he was a very good college quarterback. Not the case here. And I think that's the best news. But also, you still have to be a better offense. If this team is truly going to at least reach the 6-7 win mark that would show us a definitive step forward in Willie Fritz's second season, it's not given that's going to happen. But I think the good news is there will not be outsized expectations here. I think us, the fan base, we just want to see a competent offense in 2025. And I think we will. But I think it is good for all involved that there will be reasonable expectations.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny. My first line, we obviously I hope everyone knows that we don't just like come on here and just pull things out of our what and just fly by the seat of our pants.
I mean, sometimes, but
But I have in my notes here my very first line: offensive thoughts dash. My expectations, to be honest, are kind of low. I'll say I want big things and think big things are coming. Last year, though, I just need it to be better than it was last year, which automatically sets us up for low expectations. It was so bad last year, and I just need it to be better this year. And when the bar is that low, I consider that kind of low expectations. Do I expect this team to come out and be the 2008, 2009, 2011 Houston Cougars that are coming out and they're putting up 56 a game and just, the playbook is, hey, Patrick Edwards, just run in a straight line as deep as possible, and one of the best quarterbacks to ever play will just heave it up there, and you're going to run under it. Do I expect that? No. It just needs to be better than it was last year, and if it is, then this team's going to be a lot better. It doesn't need to be one place better. It needs to be about 20 places better than it was last year, but that shouldn't be very hard, man. It shouldn't be hard to be 20 spots better this year versus last.
I go further. I would say you need to be like 55 spots better than last year.
Yeah,
when you were 130 something in the country in
just
scoring
be that,
offense.
and that's not hard to accomplish. You weren't good last year. You were saved in the last week of the season by not being the worst offense in the country by scoring. I know we love to look at and this is no shot at it. I like SP Plus as well. And we were bad SP Plus team last year, but it didn't feel like the SP Plus ranking really accounted for how bad this offense was last year. And the expectation is to be better than that by a decent amount.
The offense was so bad that when Bill Connolly released the final preseason SP Plus in the last week or so, and I saw that we were 91st, I was like, it's actually a little better than I thought.
I did the same thing during my research. I saw it. I was like, 95. Okay.
I think it was 90. I think it's funny. The offense, I think, was 91 in the preseason. The defense was 40. And I think I'd probably have defense. I think the actual on-field results, the defense will be a bit lower and the offense will be a bit higher. I think around 65, 70 for the offense and
I agree.
55, 60 for the defense, which I think still gets you around where this team would like to be. So, said it a couple times already, Conner Weigman gets the blessing of having to follow maybe the worst combined 2 seasons of quarterback play that we have seen in our about 20 seasons each as Cougar football fans. So I think you can make a decent case for 2012 and 2013 on that one. So the concern isn't really that Weigman will be an upgrade. We both probably take it on faith that he is going to be an upgrade. And also, I think take it as a given he'll have significantly more weapons around him than any U of H quarterback did last season. Guys like Stephon Johnson Jr., Rashawn Sanford, Mekhi Musback, along with instant impact guys like Dean Connors, Tanner Koziol, Amari Thomas, and Harvey Broussard coming in. The Weigman concerns, such as I have them, are twofold, and one of those isn't even directly involved with Weigman, but it's easy. Can he stay healthy for a full season? He had a healthy spring for the first time in years, something Willie Fritz brought up pretty consistently whenever he was in front of any kind of media availability this offseason. But we can't just ignore that Weigman's last 2 college seasons were significantly affected by injuries. And his first one, he only played part of a season because he was a true freshman that Jimbo Fisher probably didn't have immediate plans of playing, and then kind of got to the end of an unproductive season, was just like, F it, let's see what the 5-star freshman can do, and actually did fairly well for himself. So if he's healthy, we're talking about a quarterback who has a good arm, was smart enough to be trusted to run a notoriously complex offense that Fisher ran his first 2 seasons as a very young college quarterback at his previous program, Texas A&M, and even had some success doing it when he was healthy. And the guy was a consensus 5-star recruit for a reason, even if now maybe you adjust that to, okay, like maybe he's not every bit of that. The guy was still a big recruit for a reason. But also, and we'll get to this in a little bit, so I won't dive too much into it, does he get the protection in front of him to, 1, allow him to run the offense to the best of his abilities, and 2, avoid the kind of injuries that happen when you have an ineffective offensive line, which we've quite often had, but are hoping for something better. So that's really what I'm thinking about with Weigman. I take it, again, as an article of faith that he is going to be much better than what we've had at quarterback since anyone who's been here post Clayton Tune. But is he going to stay healthy for a full season? And are you going to get the line play in front of him and make that happen? But it is exciting to have a quarterback who I have a whole lot more faith in than Donovan Smith and Zion Chris, even if I didn't expect going to 2024 the combination of those guys to do as poorly as they did. Like even if we don't have as bad of a season as we did last year, let's just say the offense is like the 95th scoring offense or something, I still think Conner Weigman is a pretty sizable upgrade there, and that's exciting. Even acknowledging the concerns that you have potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to, just a quick little plug here, Sam, but if you want to see our feelings after a deep cut wise after we watched 2 Weigman games each, you can find that on the Patreon. Simple as $5 a month to kind of get that. Just a little shout out there. Like, we went pretty deep in what we saw film wise.
We watched every snap of his against Notre Dame and Missouri. We picked kind of a not great Conner Weigman game. We picked, I think, his best game from the 2024 season and gave our thoughts. And I think it was a great listen. Thank you for plugging that, Bobby. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just plugging that because I do think, like, not to pat ourselves on the back, I think it was a really good episode where we got into what we think of him. Obviously, we're going to give that here as well. But that being said, for all the fall reports, this summer camp that they've said is that he's done a really good job and he's looked really good. Let me also mention that it came out this week that, like, somebody wanted to ask Coach Fritz, like, do you feel the need to name Conner Weigman the starter heading into the season? And it's like, yeah, man, I'm pretty sure, like, you don't need to have a press conference and say this is our guy. If he takes all the snaps with the ones in camp, he's probably gonna be your starter there. Just kind of a ridiculous question in my opinion. Like, yeah, no shit, he's the starter.
Not one of our friends that we generally shout out here, by the way. Okay, someone's someone's like running to towel. Like, this is not Ryan. This is not Duarte.
Yeah,
we love Ryan and Duarte. And quite frankly, we rely on those 2 guys a heavy amount as non-Houston residing Cougs.
Yeah, let me just say, if it was Ryan, I would have messaged Ryan and told Ryan what I thought of it.
We just would have asked a dumb fucking question like that. But sorry, I don't mean I don't get you
no
sidetracked here.
We're good. I knew it was going to be a little sidetrack. Like, I saw the question and I think I sent it to you and I was like,
you did.
What is this? Like, so anyways, and one thing I heard on, I can't remember if I saw it on Twitter or if I saw it on Coog Fans, which, I try not to go to Coog fans too much, but it is nice there, especially since Ryan kind of took it over. It's gotten a little bit more newsy over there. This quarterback room really feels more like a Willie Fritz quarterback room. He came in, he had Donovan Smith last year that wasn't really his guy, but I think he was the best guy heading into last season. I think he did some things that Coach Fritz kind of likes, and Coach Fritz was kind of happy with it. I think Zion Chris was kind of brought in to be his backup. You knew Donovan had some injury concerns and that kind of stuff. So maybe you bring in Zion Chris. Then Donovan doesn't look so good last year. You bring Zion in, you kind of bring him off the bench. I think if you were building a quarterback for a Willie Fritz offense, he kind of looks like Conner Weigman. So with that, it just really feels like it is his kind of quarterback, a guy who can run. You look at the 3 quarterbacks that he has brought in. Austin Carlisle, everyone's saying quite possibly the fastest guy on the field. Zion Chris, we saw last year, great runner. Conner Weigman, good runner as well, in some of the tape that we saw. Is he Zion Chris out there? Is he, Greg Ward? No, he's not. Let's be honest with ourselves. But you saw enough wheels from him that teams are going to have to respect it. And so, going back, looking at some of Fritz's offenses, when his offenses have looked the best is with a guy who kind of plays like Conner Weigman does. So super excited. A guy who can throw. Weigman can run it a little bit, keep offenses honest with the read option. You're not going to watch Conner Weigman run the speed option, something like that. But guy who's smart, who tends to make the right read out there. You saw a couple on that tape that we looked at where maybe he shouldn't have thrown it where he did, but that's going to happen to a lot of quarterbacks at the college level. So I don't think it's something to necessarily be worried about. I think this quarterback room is what Fritz wants, and it's really exciting to see it going forward.
Yeah, Weigman's not Greg Ward. He's not De'Aaron King, but he's also not Kyle Allen.
Right.
Like, the guy can, he could have a 6-7 carry, 40-something yard rushing game if the opposing defense just leaves him as a completely unmarked number in the run game, or when the play breaks down and maybe the opposing defense clears out of it, he can find 9-10 yards in front of him, which is, I think that was one of those pleasant surprises when we watched the Notre Dame and Mizzou games they played last year.
Yeah, definitely one of those guys who you can get to be who can be pretty dangerous when you're playing man coverage and everyone's kind of watching their guy, not watching Conner Weigman, and he, like you said, it clears out and he's picking up 10, 11, 12 up the middle, and then hopefully sliding. I think that's going to be a big thing for him, is the 2 extra yards is not worth you sitting out 2 weeks.
Exactly. Glad you mentioned Chris, because he goes from being an intriguing athlete who, certainly in most of my 2024 experience watching the guy, didn't look like a Big 12 level passer, to I think now one of the best QB2 options in this conference. I really do understand why Fritz and the offensive staff had Chris focusing on QB reps in the spring practices and fall camp more recently. Weigman's injury history demands that you have a guy ready at QB2, but I do hope this staff is thinking about creative ways to get Zion Chris on the field. Like, that he's a part of the offense besides just being the guy on the sidelines ready to come in the event that we hope that doesn't happen, where Conner Weigman gets hurt, because he's an electric athlete and not a groundbreaking insight for me, but the more of those you could get on the field, the better. Like, if you could find 10 or 15 plays where Zion Chris, they don't have to all be gadget pass plays where the defense immediately is oh, they're going to pass the ball. You're going to go for a double pass to Chris lined up a receiver. They can have him out there and actually have the risk of running a route for the opposing defense. And also Chris, potentially being involved in a pass out there. Because as much as he was limited as a passer, what we saw, he's still going to give you magnitudes more as a passer than your average wide receiver or running back trick play. I think just having him out there, he's a guy with high-end speed, not just high-end quarterback speed, just high-end speed, period. And the more of those you can have in the field, the better. And I'm not presenting any ground-breaking ways of using him, but I hope his role this year isn't just on the sidelines in the event Weigman gets hurt, or out there in mop-up duty, because he's a guy who can impact the game positively for you, even if we probably both agree at this point that it shouldn't be him being your primary starting quarterback if you can avoid it.
I think you're right. He is going to provide a nice little change of pace that you can occasionally throw out there, who has an arm enough that, if they see him out there, they're not just going to put 9 in the box and know that he's running. It'd be really nice to be able to just kind of beat him over the top every so often. A nice, it's going to sound weird, but he could add a wrinkle to, I know usually it's your punter out there holding snaps, but you have him out there. Kind of adds a little wrinkle to the special teams if he could do something like that as well. I think that would be kind of interesting. And then, I mentioned Austin Carlisle back there taking punts. Returning
no chance. I mean, I'm just gonna say this: no chance we see him doing that in a meaningful game this year. It's a fun season storyline. I'm saying this: he will not take a meaningful punt. It's good to have him out there, good to consider it. He will not take a meaningful punt in a game. If it's gonna be a freshman, it's gonna be Jackie Martin. But you have enough qualified guys to do that. I think, other than maybe, I don't know, you run him out there late in the SFA game if you're up by 40, 50 points. But
yeah.
So even if Weigman, and I alluded to this a little bit ago, even if he's everything you want to be at quarterback, that offensive line, whose job is protect him, is going to be a big question mark until we have really a month's worth of data for this season. And for not the first time or probably the last time this offseason, I'm going to say that this Cougar offensive line is the most important position group for the 2025 season. It's not the only important one, but it's the most important because I do think this O-line will be better than 2024, but if it's only slightly better, then we probably aren't talking about a team that's improved as much as we want it to be in the whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we kind of had a discussion last week after we recorded, but, we had heard from Ryan over at Go Cougs that his impression watching the games was that the line was kind of set. You had Ndukwe and left tackle. You had Brooks at left guard. You had Pancake at center. You had Wyckoff at right guard. And then at right tackle, you had Merriman. And then about a week later, would you say it was probably a week later, right about there?
It was, I don't know how long the difference, but it was a week ago today. It was the 12th. We're recording this on the 19th. It was definitely the 12th.
Was when Duarte comes out and says, "Oh, look, they're having they're experimenting on the line." And this time you had Ebasole at left tackle, Brooks at left guard, Wyckoff moved from right guard to center. You had Agnello at right guard, and then Merriman at right tackle. So it looks like you kept your left guard and right tackle the same. Wyckoff ships over to center. And yeah, I spent a few minutes texting you back and forth while I was eating Waffle House on my birthday. Great birthday breakfast, by the way.
I didn't know you were a Waffle. I knew it was your birthday. I was all that, but I didn't know you were a Waffle House. Hell yeah.
Big Waffle House guy over here. But, you and I saw this a little bit differently. And I think that's kind of what makes this podcast fun. I think 2 weeks before the first game, and we haven't decided our O-line is a little concerning. I agree it's great that we have some depth. We have depth, but I would have really liked to have seen everything be decided by now. What concerns me, like I said, is, you hear former players talk about how O-lines take time to gel together, to start working together. And it's really because, you have to trust that the guy next to you is not just doing his job, but reading the defense and the setup and what's going to happen the same, right? Pressure's coming our way. I got the right end. You got the left. You got the nose tackle here. I got the blitzing linebacker, right? And so those kind of things take time. And I was hoping that, 3 weeks before or 4 weeks before, that we kind of had it locked in and they were using that time to gel. So that you can kind of have those, so that you can be familiar with, what your role is in the offense. And, as a guy who sat up here and said no quarterback in the country would have been good with that line last year, I'm worried that it isn't settled yet. I'm not saying that the O-line is going to be bad. I was just really hoping that we would have had it settled by, last week. And before anything, Sam, I think you and I are fans more than we are podcasters about this team. And as a fan, I was hoping we were installing the offense and guys were learning their their position more than, oh, this guy might be better than this guy at this time of the season. Now, the example for me is kind of looking at Wyckoff there. He has center experience, which I think is great. But he's
center experience playing with Conner Weigman, by the way, at A&M.
Yeah, that's true. But he's going from right guard to center a week apart from each other, and that's new assignments. That's identifying the Mike linebacker. That's identifying what kind of pressure could be coming. That's, the center is quote unquote the quarterback of the offensive line. And to just go from all your right guard, this is what I'm seeing at right guard. This is my job when I'm a right guard, moving to center in a week and then trying to get that ready and smooth. And you got all your calls down within 2 weeks of the first game. A little concerning, when an offensive lineman goes down and you're watching a game and you hear the color commentator go like, oh man, this, now that the right guard's down, the right tackle is going to slide to right guard and, and then we're going to have the backup right tackle come in and something like that. Like, this could just be like my, not recency bias, but just my bias to like be correct. But it always seems like there's a guy who, when he slides over, an assignment gets missed, your quarterback, the running back gets tackled behind the line of scrimmage. It just seems like it doesn't quite work as well for the first probably drive in which the substitution has happened. So that's just kind of like my concern. The line's going to be better than it was last year. I think just raw talent wise, we talked about X's and O's and Jimmys and Joes. I think the Jimmys and Joes are better this year. I think it has no choice but to be better. I think it was that bad last year that no quarterback in the country would have been successful behind that line last year. I think just raw talent, you've gotten better. I would have loved to have seen it settled in, getting reports from camp that, man, this O-line looks good. There doesn't seem to be any miscommunications. There seems to be a bunch of guys who have a lot of talent and they're battling for that. If this team is what we kind of think and hope it's going to be, it's got to be better. Any news that isn't holy shit, they are dominating, for me, will be overreacted to. In a world where all I want is good news on the O-line, even news that isn't bad news is bad news for me.
Looking back on our difference of opinions about that, I think we both had valid points. Your position was
let me clarify that too.
Your position was that swapping out guys, not having a settled starting five at the position group where cohesion is the most important with the season looming this close was concerning. My position was that guys like Mackenzie Agnello and Alvin Ebosele were brought in here specifically to compete for starting jobs and that it would be a bigger red flag if neither guy could push for first team reps in fall camp, especially Agnello, who was a second team all Mountain West Conference guy on one of the country's best rushing offenses last year. Like if that guy's not even pushing for a starting job at this point, like what went wrong in your eval? But something even in our arguing on this topic that we both quickly agreed on is U of H does have some room at the start of this season to experiment with your first two opponents being an FCS team and Rice with a new head coach. You have a little room to figure out with maybe 7 or 8 guys competing for those 5 starting spots. But I've come to sympathize more with your position, Bobby, that there has to be a time where U of H's offensive staff, especially third-year O-line coach Iman Nagavi, a guy who I think should be under some pressure to deliver a better O-line group than his last two, and your OC, Slade Nagel, need to come to a decision on a starting 5 and really get those guys the needed reps to become a cohesive unit, because you have really critical games, the home game against Colorado and then the roadie to Oregon State to close out non-conference in your first month of the season, games that I think, I'm not saying you're counting on to get to 6, especially because of Colorado, but I mean, I think at the minimum, you have to split those two to feel confident that you're going to get to the 6-win mark to get to bowl eligibility. And O-line's a big part of that. And this is maybe the toughest position group to build quickly. And U of H fans, us included, should definitely temper our expectations accordingly. But I also don't think Willie Fritz is blowing smoke that this will be a significantly improved group. And you could see it in his comments this offseason versus the last one. How improved, I think, is going to be an unanswerable question, really, until we've seen 3 or 4 full games of the O-line in action. And the only position group that, in my opinion, you can make a case for being as critical or about as critical to the 25 season as the O-line is the secondary and defense. There's a group being counted on more, and it's going to be at minimum largely new faces. There's at least one scenario where it's entirely new faces. So I would have a hard time seeing not at least one of Ndukwe and Hunter starting week 1, but it's going to be a mostly new group of guys, and that's a little scary. But also, after what you saw last season, it was entirely necessary to have it be an entirely new group of guys. Where I don't think we'll have to qualify our enthusiasm as much is going to be, the receivers and running backs, where this staff did a ton to add in the transfer portal and also did a good job retaining key guys in those groups. Of course, you would rather have Joseph Manjack here than TCU, but I said as much when he left. I understand why he would want to play his last college football season in a program that'll be more of a sure thing to have a good passing offense to the Cougars. And to me, whether or not U of H has Manjack isn't load-bearing as to whether or not U of H can improve on having one of the worst passing offenses in the country and one of the worst passing offenses in our history as a program. That's going to have a lot more to do with what we just got done talking about. Can Conner Weigman stay healthy? And very much related to that, can this offensive line keep Weigman healthy and upright? Those are the important things. But I'm extremely I am as bullish on this position group being better on the previous season as maybe any offensive or defensive group that we're going to talk about in this episode and the last one. This is such an exciting group to me.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's super exciting looking into the season. It's honestly one of those things where I guess I'd kind of overlooked them, just kind of reading different magazines and previews and doing my own
O-line tunnel vision, man.
Dude, I'm telling you, if you had any idea how tunnel vision, you could tell me we're starting, all freshmen at these positions, and I'd be like, are they going to have a hole to run through? Are we going to have something more than 5 guys made out of paper mache?
Like, never mind that. Tell me about the left guards and right guards we got here, man.
Yes. Yes. But, I was like, oh yeah, we should be pretty solid there. And then I was doing my research for this, and I was like, actually, we're going to be pretty damn good in these spots. The first and hardest thing to miss is the transfer Tanner Koziol. I still haven't found a pronunciation for it.
I'm going with Koziol.
All right, we'll go with Koziol until we see until next week
until someone yells at us the next 24 hours or doesn't.
Yeah. All right. No one yelled at us yet, so he's one of the top transfers in the country, not just like top tight end transfers. Right? No, like he enrolled at Wisconsin. Like he's from Ball State. He was pretty dang good last year. Not sure what happened at Wisconsin. He enrolled at Wisconsin, then left and came here, or was committed to Wisconsin.
He was enrolled. You're right.
Yeah. He was enrolled at Wisconsin, then left. Just kind of odd. Just kind of, wonder what happened there. Not saying something bad happened. Just kind of curious, He decided to come to U of H. Not that this matters, but he is the highest rated U of H player on College Football 26. Just a little heads up there. So the people at EA Sports think high of him as well. And as somebody who's played the game, he's a weapon. He's a weapon on the game. So hopefully he's a weapon out there as well on the field. He averaged 9 yards per catch at Ball State last year, 94 receptions, 8 touchdowns. You look versus a Vandy team last year that beat Alabama. He was pretty solid. He had 9 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. I would just kind of expect him to be Conner Weigman's security blanket. I think multiple times this offseason I've referred to him as like Jason Witten to Weigman's Tony Romo. It's just kind of the guy who's going to find a space, sit down, pick you up 8, and keep moving the chain. So anytime you have a quarterback who's coming in new, a new guy trying to learn a new system, that kind of stuff, those little security blankets like that are kind of big. And so I think it's going to be someone that you are going to see relied upon heavily this season.
Among the many things you didn't have last year was just somebody who gets you 5 to 7 yards in the passing game.
Yep.
Like, not like Kozial's numbers at Ball State, not explosive. He was definitely a volume for modest yards per catch, but that's what you need so badly. You need some, like, not everything's gonna be a deep shot. Like, you need somebody who can move the sticks. You need somebody who could set up a second and short, third and short, and keep you on schedule offensively. And I think Tanner Kozial's part of that equation, but I think the even bigger parts of that equation, or excuse me, the conclusion of that equation, because Tanner Kozial is also a big part of it, is also Amari Thomas, who comes in as one of the top pass catchers in the UAB program history just from his 2 seasons there. Again, not a hugely explosive guy from his time playing for the Blazers, but a guy that was able to immediately get up to Division I speed, something that I always rate really highly when I'm looking at guys coming in. Like, this guy came in, and no matter how high of a level of high school football you play, the jump from that to American Athletic Conference football, which is what Amari Thomas did from his senior year at a Birmingham area high school to his freshman year of college, is enormous. It's the biggest jump by magnitudes these guys have made, and that he was ready to be a key part of their offense in one offseason. Like, that tells me the jump from the American to the Big 12, which is not nothing, but I don't think is like a magnitudes kind of jump, is not going to be a problem. Like, those 2 guys, Kozial and Thomas, filling that role of move the sticks kind of pass catcher is enormous. And I think now you have 3 guys with Mekhi Muse returning who can kind of fill that role of getting you those 5, 6, 7, even 8 yard kind of gains. And if Weigman's getting the protection he needs, you also have the combination of Stephon Johnson and Ulala transfer Harvey Broussard, who I think are good candidates to be deep threats to the passing game. You also have Dean Connors, who I'm going to get to more in a second, who I think is going to be a guy you could use as a running back in the passing game as well. And then there's also the question of what you can get out of guys like Kobe Young, who was one of the Fritz staff's first big recruiting gets, who got hurt in fall camp last year. Also the former Tulsa transfer duo of Devin Williams, who had his moments last year, was hampered by U of H having just an abysmal passing game, and Marquise Shoulders, who got hurt early last season. I think out of those 3 guys I mentioned by name, Kobe Young is the most interesting wild card from that group out of camp. And with the running backs, you add Rice super senior Dean Connors to a group that already returned 2 guys coming off promising freshman seasons, Rashawn Sanford and Jamarian Burnett. Sanford led the Cougars in rush yards, and Burnett only lost 5 yards total on 43 carries as a true freshman. You saw some of DJ Butler getting cameo looks as well. He was part of that first Fritz recruiting class as a true freshman last year. The most valuable thing Connors gives this group is something I just said a moment ago. He's a receiving threat. He could be a third down back. Not that he can't do some of your more typical running back kind of things, but when you have a guy who caught 105 passes as a running back in his last 2 college seasons, it behooves you to utilize that guy in the pass game. And I don't think Dean Connors will have 50 receptions this year, but if he has, say, 30, 35, 40, then that's going to be a big net positive for this offense.
Yeah, just to kind of go back to receivers, because I didn't really touch on them. I kind of went Kozial there. You'd like to have Manjack back, like you said. But then you just kind of, I kind of like the combo of Mekhi Muse kind of take the top off, small speedy guy who can just kind of outrun corners you're hoping, or get loose across the middle on some kind of mesh concept or some kind of slant, make a guy miss, and then take it to the house. You combine that with a 6'2" guy like Stephon Johnson, and you're just going to see, that kind of tough, take a hit kind of guy in Stephon Johnson. Gives you a really nice combo. Wide receivers there. Combine that with Kozial, and you're going to see something good from this wide receiver core, like you said. And then at running back, Dean Connors has been getting a lot of hype, deservingly so. Like, I'm not going to, sit here and poop on getting Dean Connors. But, you kind of forget about Rashad Sanford, Burnett, Stacey Sneed. The running back room might, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I'd say that running back room is probably the best and deepest room that we have on this team. There's a lot of talent there. And Dean Connors is just going to come in and add a little bit more flair there in the passing game, I think.
Definitely agree with deepest. I think you can make a good case for best as well. Like, I'm glad you mentioned Stacey Sneed. He's now a veteran guy in this group, has about 1,100 yards rushing, in these past 3 seasons, but hasn't really seen his role take off after being your top rushing back in the 2022 season, when admittedly you weren't very good at running the ball in Clayton Tune's final season. Like everything we're going to talk about, the success of your run game, the success of your pass game hinges on better O-line play, and the run game, hinges on a passing game that can actually take pressure off the running game, which you just did not have last season. But having 3 interesting, if not quite yet proven returning backs and a veteran grad transfer in Dean Connors with a pretty unique and interesting skill set is enough. It's enough for me to think this is going to be one of the more improved running back groups in the country, and makes me, I would say, just as excited as you about what they can do in the coming season.
Yeah, should be, like you said, everything's going to come down at the end of the day for us with the offensive line play. But I think there's a lot of talent that I think we forget how talented some of these players were based on that offense that we had last year. We forget how good, I think we were so busy focusing on, I hate to say focusing on the negative, but it really felt like we were talking about how bad this offense was, that we kind of go and we forget about that there was some talent on this offense last year. It just wasn't utilized very well, and that's why you have a new OC in here.
And speaking of, we've already mentioned it a couple of times, but worth diving at least quickly in on. Fritz made an offensive coordinator change, I think, before the last week of the 2024 season, a justified change, as U of H had at that point the worst scoring offense in all Division I FBS when former OC Kevin Barbe was let go before the season finale versus BYU. Even acknowledging now that U of H was much more deficient at quarterback and offensive line play than even we expected in the preseason, you cannot be a play caller for as bad an offense as U of H was last season and keep your job. It's just, if guys are going to make if guys are going to make high 6 figures or more to be coordinators, you just simply can't keep your job after that kind of season. So in comes Slade Nagel, longtime Willie Fritz assistant at Tulane last year, coached LSU's tight ends. Nagel was Tulane's offensive play caller for Fritz's last 2 seasons there, though he only held the OC title officially for 2023, which also includes the 2022 season where Tulane won the American and the Cotton Bowl with a top 20 offense, and also a 2023 season where Tulane won 11 games, but on offense, the Green Wave were much less successful than the previous year. Like Weigman, Slade Nagel is blessed by the fact that if U of H has a lower middle of the Big 12 kind of offense, it will still be drastically better than what we saw last season. Fans can be irrational about their own team, and I don't even really disagree with Tulane fans who wouldn't have nice things to say about Slade Nagel's last season there offensively. Bobby, if our offense last year had put up 2023 Tulane numbers, we would have been bowling. Mm-hmm. Like that just tells you how much of a nowhere to go but up situation, which we've now said at least a few times. But it's an ideal situation for a first year coordinator quarterback combo like we have with Slade Nagel and Conner Weigman here.
Yeah, I absolutely agree and co-sign everything you just said, bud.
I won't bludgeon you and the listeners with how bad last year's offense was, because we've said it a few times. We all lived it, but this was a stat that I had to find a way to shoehorn it, because it gobsmacked me when I saw it. And I think you know the one I'm going to mention here quickly. This was a group that averaged 14 points per game a season ago, only better than historically bad Kent State's offense by a tiny fraction. But that's not the stat that I'm going to mention, Bobby. In the entirety of the 2024 season, your Houston Cougar offense scored, drumroll, 12 points in the third quarter, combined in 12 games.
That's a point a game.
It's a point a game. You didn't even get for all third quarters played last season the full allotment of points you get for scoring 2 touchdowns in the points after. So
doesn't feel great, bud.
Does not feel great, but it is also, for an offense with a lot, it would be a not ideal situation if you had a really great season last year and then you're trying to replace it with a bunch of transfers. You got a new coordinator and it just feels you're in a nowhere to go but down situation. Opposite here. So as bad as it was a season ago, you might be the most improved offense in all Division I FBS when it's all said and done. And that still might mean you're the 70th or 75th best offense, but that's like 50, 60 spots better than last year, which I guess that's, we really paid the piper for watching bad offensive football. If the Cougars, not SFA, because that doesn't really count, but like, let's just say, hypothetically, we have a good first half against Oregon State. We have 24 points at the half. Can you imagine right now seeing a Houston Cougar offense be, because it wasn't as historically bad Holgerson's last season, but it wasn't good. There were so many times. I think that offense was like ridiculously bad in the first quarter. We're just starved here for a solid offense, and I think we will get it more often than we've gotten it recently this season.
Yeah, you certainly hope that you don't have a repeat of what we saw last year, or maybe even the year before.
So we'll go from the gridiron to the pitch. Bobby, talk a little Houston Cougar soccer. I know, before we get to our larger Big 12 football season preview thoughts, got to talk about the Cougar team that was back in action and playing its first two matches of the 2025 season since we last recorded. But main result we're going to talk about was a 0-0 draw last Thursday night on the road at UTSA, a match that featured a definite heart and mouth moment in the last minute where UTSA got a player free for essentially a one-on-one with the Cougar goalkeeper, and Cougar goalie Maggie Manning had to commit a challenge that was a pretty clear penalty to keep the UTSA player from scoring an easy goal. Thankfully, UTSA's penalty missed wide left. To her credit, Manning guessed perfectly, and I think would have saved a shot on target there. In the game finished moments later, 0-0. Bobby, I know you watched this one live with me. What were your big takeaways from the season opener?
My biggest takeaway was that, yeah, you didn't score, right? I said one of the things I was looking for is better offense. But you could definitely see that there were more opportunities than I saw from a lot of games last year. You had a couple of dangerous chances. But I think my biggest takeaway was this is a team that is bringing in a new system with a new coach, and they haven't played a lot of soccer together, right? There were a lot of times, and I think you texted to me that, like, the buildup was there. It was just a matter of once you get into that kind of final third, because typically they split soccer fields up into thirds when you're looking at, like, analysis. Get into that final third, and there just seemed to be, like, miscommunications, and I won't even say, like, miscommunications, because that kind of sounds bad, like, oh, they weren't communicating well. It's just like I said with the offensive line, you just kind of, once you play with somebody, you know that, like, if I get it into the chest, I'm going to turn right, and when I turn right, you're going to make your break, and you're going to do, you just start to understand your teammate. And it seemed like those were just a little off. And there was, like, some through balls that Cougar Soccer kind of went through that some players hit, and they were just a little bit out of the reach of their teammate. And you kind of look at who's passing to who, and yeah, they've been playing soccer together for 2 months. It's not as precise as you kind of hope. I think what you saw out of U of H in this game was really good. I think you saw the start and what you saw the potential, and what you're hoping for is they gel a little bit more, come Big 12 play, and end up surprising some teams along the way.
And also 5 days later, we have some context for how good UTSA soccer is at home. They gave the number 9 team in the country and the top team in the Big 12 preseason poll, TCU, who dismantled Pepperdine 6-1 in their opener. They gave them about as tough of a test as the Cougars. The Frogs eventually won that game 1-0, but took till the 81st minute to break through. I think it'd be too early to make any grand pronouncements on any team, but UTSA has 180 minutes of soccer where they've played Big 12 opponents, one of whom's a top 10 national team, and were extremely hard to break down defensively, which makes me feel a little bit better about that 0-0 as well. U of H actually managed more shots than TCU, though for watching all 90 minutes, I can only think of a few instances where U of H got either a shot that clearly challenged the UTSA keeper or had an attacking move where you'd actually sit up in your seat and think, U of H could maybe score in the end of this. When we did our preview last week of the soccer season, it was clear that the Cougars had both returning experience and obvious impact transfers along its defensive spine. And then as you got further up the field towards the midfielders and forwards, not that there weren't intriguing players, but those groups had a lot more question marks. Those groups had a lot more first-year players in the team, whether they were freshmen or transfers, that you would expect to take more time to gel playing together, kind of like you said. To me, the biggest positive takeaway is that U of H looked like a more defensively solid team than any of the previous few seasons. That this wasn't a game full of near misses. I would argue UTSA didn't have a clear-cut chance until the one that drew the penalty in the final minute of the match. Bobby, you will know that I got extremely angry at the extremely stupid woman doing color commentary on the ESPN Plus broadcast who said prior to the UTSA penalty that the Roadrunners should have felt like they were the better team. Something
insane.
Not at all support. Like, obviously, if you want to say for the full totality of the match, hey, UTSA is going to feel pretty unlucky that they had a penalty in the last minute and didn't win it off that. Totally agree with you. But to say that prior to the penalty that UTSA was in any way the better team is insane and not supported by any stats or the eye test. It's just an extremely silly thing from someone who's supposed to be an expert calling Division I soccer. But other miscellaneous thoughts, I thought Alex Whitcraft had a lot of really dangerous looking runs from her wide defender position. Don't think it's a too soon take for me to say that Whitcraft could be your best player this season when it's all said and done. Both of us, I think, guessed that someone not named Maggie Manning would have been starting in goal, and she looked way more veteran and composed than you would expect from a true sophomore who only had a half season starting under her belt last year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most dangerous chance actually came from, you might remember this, it was a deep free kick by Kirsten Kaiser that was pretty far from the goal, but then you saw the UTSA, it was like in the first 10 or 15 minutes of the second half, and the UTSA keeper had to adjust kind of last minute because she was just like, oh crap, this is actually on target, which kind of tells you didn't have a lot of really clear-cut chances as well. No possession stats available, but I would guess U of H had around 60-65% of the ball. You really dominated the first 15 minutes or so, the second half at least, keeping the ball, but never really result in you getting any dangerous scoring opportunities. So bottom line, your attack needs work, but I think we've also seen enough to confidently say this is a more well-drilled defensive team than the last few. And if you're going to be a work in progress in some aspect, I guess I'd rather it be, defensively solid and still needing to build chemistry in attack, as opposed to the opposite, where it's like, oh, we've got some interesting goal scoring threats, but man, we can't stop giving up chances and goals like that. You are just going to, if that opposite case is reality, you are just never going to be a team that's able to do anything serious if you're constantly giving up 2 or 3 goals. And I don't think that's going to be this Cougar team this season.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen here. I think it's really going to, like you said in our preview, we felt fairly confident in the defense this year with some of the returning starters and some of the talent you kind of brought in here. For me, I kind of pointed out that the midfield looked like something where Coach Williams didn't seem very confident in the people that were here, so he brought in a lot. And you saw that kind of in that UTSA game. U of H, it felt like, kind of dominated the midfield and the most. To your point, there's no possession stats, but it certainly did feel like U of H held possession, and you don't really do that without controlling the midfield.
We'll also note quickly, U of H's home opener was Sunday, and they beat non-D1 St. Mary's 4-0. Nothing really to note there beyond the fact that it happened.
Yeah, I think I told you. You don't learn anything from a blowout win like this. If you win 1-0 and you scored the 88th minute, maybe you're a little concerned. If you lose, you're hitting a panic button. But you win 4-0 and you go, that's what you should have done.
Yeah, it didn't. The only thing I noticed is that it seemed like Williams largely played his regular starters and rotation players, which I guess if you're trying to build chemistry there, like I get that versus the preseason approach of emptying a bench. Like I think maybe subbed a bit more liberally, but also didn't just completely empty the bench. Like you're really trying to get your starters and expected bench contributors used to playing together. And also I think setting the standard for your players who aren't playing regularly. Hey, you don't just get to go out there in a game just to go out there. Like you have to actually earn your place out there, which I think was the only other real notable takeaway I had from that one.
Yep.
2 more games this week. You will remain in the state of Texas for both. One away, one home. Thursday, probably tomorrow or sooner as you're listening, the Cougs will travel north on 45 to take on the Sam Houston Bearcats with a K. That program last year actually handed the Cougs their first ever loss in a fairly long-running head-to-head series. That was your home opener last season. Definitely a tone setter for a pretty terrible soccer season last year. Ended up being a respectable Conference USA team. Finished fourth in their league standings. In their first week of action, they drew 1-1 at SFA and lost 2-0 at North Texas. This will be the Cats' home opener. I remember in 2019, during my only extended period of fun employment as an adult, I drove out to Huntsville because that was the U of H season opener, like the first U of H event of the 2019-2020 season. There was a really big crowd out there for that one. Would bet there's a big crowd for still first week or two of school. Haven't had an on-campus football game for the Cougs in this one as well, especially with the Cats soccer program actually being a bit better, though this should still be one the Cougs should expect to win. Definitely not a opponent of UTSA's caliber.
Yeah, you really hope that you can come up here, or you can come up to Huntsville and get the dub there.
Probably the bigger profile one, though, will be Sunday afternoon. The Cougs will host the preseason top 25 Texas Longhorns. Emphasis on preseason because they lost their season opener 3-2 at home to Northwestern State of the Southland Conference last night. The Southland Twitter social media admin was going wild. Pretty funny. Horns did get a bounce back win on the road at Long Beach State, though. I dug in on that a tiny bit, and they trailed for the first 65 minutes and got outshot for the match by a pretty wide margin. Even acknowledging that, any result against the Horns that's not a loss will be a positive, and even a loss shouldn't change anyone's big picture outlook too much on 2025 Houston Cougar soccer. But at home, and with this team looking pretty stout defensively, give me a little sliver of hope, Bobby, that the Cougs could maybe do something against the Horns.
Hey, man, it's the hope that can kill you, though. No, but in all seriousness,
it sure is, yeah.
It, like you said, defenses looked pretty good the first two games. You know, that's how soccer goes sometimes. You can kind of park the bus and hit them with a couple of counterattacks. You end up 1-0, and then you're just trying to hold possession. It can happen.
No doubt. And we're going to close tonight with what we've done for, I think, a decent chunk of our show's history of the various conferences we've been a member of. We're going to take a larger look at the Big 12 football season to come. We don't have the time, energy, or interest to go through the entirety of the conference's other 15 football playing members, but we'll say our network friends over the 10-12 network have put some good stuff out there, including their Big 12 Year of the Quarterback episode with Joe Broback and their Week 0 preview, which have all been out this month. What the two of us are going to do here is each answer 3 big questions about the Big 12 football season to come. Bobby, probably should start with the most obvious one. Who do you think will be the team holding up the trophy in Arlington in a little over 4 months' time as your 2025 Big 12 football champs?
Yeah, man, I actually, I was kind of going through. I got Phil Steele here. It's actually kind of hard this year, just with, you really have to know with no media, not that like with no poll, like not that it mattered last year, right? Arizona State comes in, but like you at least have some idea of, and it made our next questions overrated, underrated, which we'll get to. Made that a little bit harder because you're like, where's everyone rated? But this year, I have K-State winning the title, holding up the trophy in Arlington. Look, I wish I had some like crazy reason where I dove into advanced analytics and was like, oh yeah, this is why. It really boils down to one thing and one thing only, and that's Avery Johnson, their quarterback. To me, he is what everyone thinks of the new Utah quarterback, Devin Dampier is. He went 25-10 touchdown to interception ratio. Also ran for 7 touchdowns. I like what he does a lot. The hardest game will be Utah at Utah. I mean, you got Farmageddon this weekend. That one's going to be a big one. If K-State wins this game, maybe they have one loss, and that's at Utah, maybe? I don't know. They get Tech and TCU at home in the Little Apple, so that's, those are 2 difficult games that could be difficult games, and they get them at home. At least they're not traveling to Lubbock. And I just kind of like how it plays out. I like their quarterback. Their defense is solid, and the schedule kind of plays out nicely for them.
I would love to have picked something different here. You might have seen me smile right as you did. We did not at all, other than just confirming the questions, we did not say like this is the team we picked here. No communication other than just confirming the questions. I will say, not breaking any new ground in saying this, you kind of said it in the lead up to your answer too. One of the things I really appreciate about being in this conference is there are 7, 8, maybe even 9 teams that you can make a not totally crazy argument for winning the football championship. And last season also reminded us that it's entirely possible that a team outside of the 7, 8, 9 that you can make a not totally crazy argument for can still fuck around and win the whole thing. It's not Big 12 homerism to say that there is no league among the best 5 or 6 in the highest level of college football that is more wide open and has more parity among its members. I mean, the final preseason SP Plus rankings, the entire conference, Bobby, is between 18 and 63.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is not a really bad team on the schedule, and there's not a team that's so good that they're way head and shoulders among the other contenders, which that would all be a great setup for me to make some crazy prediction. But I've already alluded to it. I picked the same team as Bobby, the Kansas State Wildcats, because they did something that prevented them from making the title game last season that I believe now sets them up for long-term success. And that's the guy you spent a decent amount of time in your pick talking about, Avery Johnson, because you had him take over as a true sophomore last year after Will Howard transferred to Ohio State and really let him take his sophomore lumps. You don't see that as much anymore. You don't see you see programs go the instant gratification route, the transfer route. You don't see as many programs these days, certainly ones that, like K-State went into last year having pretty high expectations, willing to take the short-term pain for the long-term gain. As U of H fans, we saw that short-term pain up close in K-State's loss at U of H, where Johnson threw multiple picks, including one that set up the game-winning Zion Chris touchdown run. If you go look at a supercut of the most boneheaded plays of the 2024 college football season, Avery Johnson appears multiple times. He ran out of bounds at the end of the second quarter when the clock hit zeros. He committed an intentional grounding in the end zone against Iowa State in the game that ultimately cost K-State a chance to go to the Big 12 title game. Obviously, those moments are ones you did not enjoy if you were a K-State fan, but that's the kind of on-the-job learning a young quarterback absolutely has to do, and that you just don't see top 25 programs. They've become so risk-averse in developing younger guys, especially younger guys at the position where you have the most impact on the game, like quarterback. They're quicker to grab a lower-level veteran or something more immediate instead of taking the lumps with the guy who I think has an All-American level ceiling like Avery Johnson. He is going to be drastically improved this season, is one of the country's best dual threats at quarterback, gets his top receiver back, plus you have a home run hitter at running back and Dylan Edwards returning alongside him. That 2024 season was the payoff for K-State, I think, winning the whole thing this season. They also have a ton returning from a good defense. Then they bring in standout transfers like Gabe Powers from Ohio State and Marion Fortenberry from South Alabama. This team is going to win the Big 12 conference and represent the Big 12 in the CFP, though I did give serious consideration to your 24 champions, Arizona State, who has a ton back from that team, Iowa State, who I think you could make a lot of the same arguments for them with Rocco Becht, and just a ton coming back across the board, even though they have a couple of receivers playing for the Texans now. And that's what makes the week 0 Iowa State K-State game so interesting, because these are teams that I think you can make very easy cases for winning the whole league, and the kind of compelling contest that we don't always get in the week 0. So I think it's very funny that in a league where you could make 7 or 8 or 9 different predictions, that you and I, without any communication, both landed on K-State. I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah. I think everything you said about K-State taking their lumps last year with Avery Johnson is going to pay off this year.
So the more loaded 2 questions we're going to close with, and like you said, ones that we didn't, because the Big 12 did not have a preseason poll, we didn't have as much to go on here, but I'm interested to see what you come up with. Bobby, who do you think is the team the various preseason projections are underrating in the Big 12?
Underrating? Look, this is not how I wanted to answer this question, but it's going to be your University of Houston Cougars. Look, you catch Arizona State at Arizona State. That's not great, right? And you got Baylor in Waco. But with Baylor being the final game of the year, it could be a crazy one when you really think about it. Baylor could be out of the Big 12 title picture. Dave Aranda could have lost the team, something like that. I don't think he's going to get fired this year if they go, 5-7. He could, though. He was on the hot seat last year. A good year saved him. A lot of places are picking them to be kind of a dark horse candidate to win Big 12 this year. If they're 4-7 heading into that game, or 5-6, maybe playing for a bowl. I don't know. It feels like Aranda could have lost that team by then. But you do, like I said, you catch Arizona State at Arizona State. But just looking at the schedule, the Cougs could legit be 6-1 heading into that Arizona State game. Like, they could be, right? You take a look at the schedule and you just go, all right, the first two, okay, those should be wins. Colorado is going to be kind of the show it game. There's 3-0. You beat Oregon State. There's 4-0. Then, you lose to Tech. So you're 4-1. You beat Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Then you beat Arizona. You're 6-1, right? Heading into Arizona State. I've seen crazier, right? But look, I'm going to say this, and I want it on the record now. If the Cougs are 4-0 and they're hosting Texas Tech, that won't be an easy game for Texas Tech. There's going to be some momentum there. Tech comes in, Cougs are 4-0, kind of receiving votes. I think if you're 4-0 at that point, you're probably at least receiving at least a couple of votes.
I would agree. Probably not ranked because it's Colorado and Oregon State are your best wins there, but receiving votes, yeah.
Right. I can see it. Because not everyone, it's kind of hard to find undefeated teams at that point. Tech comes in, they're top 15. If they go 4-0, they're top 15, top 20. Dude, TDECU will be rocking. It will be crazy. It's going to be the blue out game, which I love. And it's that place is going to be crazy, and that screams upset alert to me, man. That screams upset alert to me, right? So imagine you head into Arizona State 7-0. You got momentum. Like, if I told you the Cougs start 7-0 with a win versus Texas Tech, that's underrated, man. Like, I kept going like, who's more underrated than that? And I was like going through it, and I know it's such a homer pick, but like, I can sell myself enough on being 6-1 going into that Arizona State game. I can sell myself on that. You should be better than Arizona. The Colorado game's a toss-up. You take a loss versus, and you're getting Colorado at home, so like, it's a toss-up.
Early season, no Shador, no Travis Hunter. I'm not saying they aren't talented and can't beat us, but yeah.
They don't know who their quarterback is. Is there still a quarterback controversy 3 games at that? Like, there's some unanswered questions from Colorado. So, like, I can sell myself on being, 6-1. I could really sell myself on being 7-0 heading into that game. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we're 6-1. I mean, I would be, but I wouldn't be shocked, right? I'd be shocked if we were 7-0, but I could see it happening. And you go in there, you're 7-0, you got some momentum, you're a top 25 team. I don't know, crazier things have happened. I looked around, and like ESPN, they did like a power ranking. Phil Steele, they have Cincinnati ahead of us, and like, I'm sorry, why? Like, they returned their quarterback, like, cool, like, I get it, but that staff at Cincinnati's fighting for their lives right now. It just, I don't know. I could see it. Now, if you want me to go non-U of H, right?
I was just saying, no, you don't honestly, like, that's your...
But if I go non-U of H, it's going to be Kansas. Just quarterback again. You got Jaden Daniels. He's supposed to be, he was going to be all-world last year, got hurt. Maybe he can play the U of H from last year, maybe 2 years ago, when he just absolutely torched us. And it was kind of their get good game. I think that was last year. Where
last year, yes, it was, and then they also torched us 3 seasons ago.
Yeah, but I remember last year everyone was like, Kansas isn't as good as we thought, and then they played us, and they were like, "Is Kansas pretty good?" We were like, "We were their make good game." Like, I can see Kansas 100%. Being very underrated heading into the season as well. So my first pick is U of H, but for the sake of not being a homer, I'm going to go with Kansas as well.
No, I didn't even consider the possibility of us picking U of H for either of these. But no, I think you showed your work. No, it was a good pick. Imagining us, if we were 7-0 and both also in a wedding on the day of Arizona State,
right?
like, obviously it's a problem I hope to have, but it'd be a whole lot easier to ignore my phone if we're like 2-5, 3-4 than the opposite of that. But yeah, you showed your work, man.
So I'm sorry, I just have this image of us as groomsmen and like our phones going off at the exact same time. Like,
did they still make the Google glasses? Could be like, these are my new prescription frames. And I'm just like pretending like I'm wiping. I'm like trying to swipe it.
Here's what we'll do. I'll go buy the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, and I'll just be like, "Hey Meta, please."
We're gonna do that, and then we're gonna discover like we have no service like at the spot. It's like, cool, I have these $900 glasses. To me, answer the question real quick. It'd be such a good bit if I answered this Texas Tech and just pretended like I hadn't seen the full offseason of them throwing their big dick oil money around and acting like they aren't gonna find a way to win 8 games and be disappointing like they've been since the start of time. But
they call them Sand Aggies for a reason, baby. They call them.
I'm going to stay in the state of Texas, though, even the northern half of the state of Texas. I'm going to answer TCU on this one. Not that people aren't saying TCU isn't a team to watch this season, but I would take TCU over a number of the teams that I've seen bandied about as serious Big 12 contenders. Yes, we are obligated to mention that they let a U of H team coming off back-to-back shutouts drop 30 points on them in their own stadium when U of H was a terrible road team last season. We are obligated to mention that. But they have Josh Hoover coming back as one of the better returning quarterbacks out there. And as much as TCU was a truly terrible rushing offense last season, I don't believe that Kendall Browse-led offense will have a bad rushing attack 2 seasons in a row. My feelings on the younger Browse are pretty well documented over this pod's history, but I would bet on them being one of the most improved rushing offenses in all of college football. I don't see that happening with him running this offense twice, even if you're going to be tendency-wise somewhat pass first, because you got Josh Hoover. Why wouldn't you let the guy throw the ball around? Mm-hmm. Also, of course, wish he was still at U of H, but we know how good Joseph Manjack can be in a good passing offense, and I don't think even the biggest Horned Frog hater would say they're going to be a bad passing offense. They should be one of the better offenses throwing it around for the second season in a row. They brought in a really interesting FCS transfer who actually, I remember watching him make some unbelievable catches in a couple of Idaho's playoff games that got on ESPN Plus last season. Eric McAllister. They also have a good returning receiver. Jordan Dwyer, I believe, is the name of the Idaho guy. Sorry, you mentioned that. And the trio of Dwyer, Manjack, and Eric McAllister, I think is going to be one of the Big 12's better receiving groups. Across the board, TCU did a really good job retaining a lot of the guys who would be their projected key returning guys. Not as bullish on their defense as their offense, and their head coach, Sonny Dykes, his teams historically have been a bit defensively suspect, but they got a lot better last season under Andy Avalos at DC, and they returned 3 of their top 4 tacklers and their sacks leader, Devin Deal. I don't know if I feel rock solid that the Frogs will be in the Big 12 title game. They have some tough road trips. They're going to be at BYU. They're going to be at Arizona State. Even in down years, playing West Virginia is never an easy roadie. But for entertainment value, I think the Frogs will be one of the best watches in the Big 12. And from doing the research, I was reminded that your Labor Day night game is going to be TCU UNC for Big Bill Belichick's first college head coaching game, and that's a game I'm pretty excited for from the Week 1 slate.
Yeah, that one should be good. Just the sheer absurdity of Bill Belichick coaching in college football.
Like 2 of the last 3 seasons, like Sonny Dykes and TCU coming off their title game appearance, got Deion Sanders in Colorado in their first game, and now gets Bill Belichick. Like that's kind of rough. Like 2 of 3. Like I haven't looked at their 26 schedule. I'm sure TCU fans are rooting for something like we have like an FCS opponent to open up the season, please.
Right.
So our third and final question to kick around, maybe the spiciest, Bobby. Which Big 12 football program do you think is being most overrated here in the preseason, and why?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Utah. Utah couldn't score last year. They have a great defense. They're going to have another great defense. And they their solution to fixing that offense was bringing in a new coordinator from New Mexico, and he brought over his quarterback. He can run like hell. You kind of look at his stats, and he is a true dual threat quarterback. But here's the thing, though: can you do it versus the Big 12? That's gonna be the biggest question. And plus, does Utah have the horses to kind of pull it off? Right? I know that their offense before has kind of been a run-based offense was kind of what we saw last year, but you saw how terrible their quarterback play was last year. It's got to get better this year if they're going to do what people think they are. Everyone is saying like, "Oh, Utah this year with their new quarterback, they're going to be the same. They're going to go back to where they were and all these kind of things." And until their quarterback can prove it, until they prove they can have a good offense, I don't see it, man. I don't see how they're going to put up enough points. They lost to a bad U of H team last year, and they lost. I will say that was a game in which their quarterback, they were probably on like their fourth string quarterback. But is this? I would assume this guy's better. I would assume Devin Dampier is better, but until I see it from them, people have them possibly playing in Arlington, finishing in the top 3 or 4 of this conference, and I just do not see it.
I get it. Yeah, I think you showed your work on that. Like, I think I think no one's disputing they're going to be better, but like, yeah. I think jumping from being, even with a better quarterback and more cohesive offensive identity, I think going from what they were last season to in Arlington, I think is too big of a jump. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I was kind of chuckling a little bit ago because you started actually making my case for my answer to this question when you were talking about U of H and the teams that are ahead of them, because I have the Cincinnati Bearcats. Not that anyone is picking them to go to the Big 12 title game, but I've seen moderate preseason buzz around them because they do have Brendan Sorsby back after he had a promising 2024 season, some defensive returners as well. All that overlooks the fact that Cincy has by far the worst head coach in all the Big 12 in Scott Satterfield. And for me, no amount of interesting returning quarterback, interesting returning defensive players like Dante Corleone, who I will admit, counter the case I'm making here, is coming into 2025 healthy, unlike last season. None of that is going to convince me opposite the fact. Because this time of the year, before the games actually get kicked off, it's easy to get tunnel vision and just look at, oh, they have interesting returning players and transfers, while ignoring fundamental stuff like Cincy's head coach not seeing or not being the overseer of a good college football team since before COVID. Which, I mean, this all might seem like a simplistic pick on my part, and it's not out of any animosity towards Cincy generally. And in fact, I would bet my pessimism is shared by at least some percentage of their fan base. Keeping it simple, Scott Satterfield, I believe you will put a decent Big 12 team on the field the exact moment it actually happens over the course of the season. I'm not seeing it. And I think it's easy to get lost in the returning production and the non-on-field stuff, the season preview kind of stuff, and just ignore the fundamentals. And fundamentally, I think he's a dog shit head coach. Yeah. And I think Cincy is being overpicked, even if they're not the kind of team that you would think of when you think, oh, they're being overhyped. Can I say something really quick also? It's not my answer to this.
How about it, buddy?
You know what I'm going to say here. I need a Texas Tech 8-4 regular season.
Oh my God, so bad.
Like a man who's been journeying through the desert, about to die of lack of water.
What did I send you a couple of days ago? That their final game where they lose to go 8-4 is going to hit like crack. Like
it's going to be better hating Bobby than any, like, don't get me wrong, love hating on the Longhorns and will certainly be ecstatic if that team, but I think 2010 to 2021-ish gave us a good decade of Longhorn hating. Mm-hmm. It's like you said during the offseason, it's like, okay, it was when we were talking about them losing the softball national title game to UT. Like, obviously, were we rooting for the Longhorns to win anything? No, that's just never something we're going to be doing. But it was the less awful outcome because, okay, like rich guy wins a title that, that years of institutional support have bought, fine, whatever. Like, you kind of expect it. But, oh man, just seeing it, like, throwing all their money to take our DC and just get all these highly paid transfers and have all this silly bullshit written about them in the offseason, and for them to do what they always do, Bobby, that will make my year. When I'm pretty confident it will happen.
Yeah, it'll be.
And you know what?
So
if I'm wrong,
good.
if Texas Tech fans have listened to 80 minutes into my podcast to find me saying this and rub our nose in, you know what? Thanks to the download, man.
Yeah,
Like I'm not mixing up with those dipshits on social media, but 80 something minutes into our show, I'm gonna say how I think both of us feel about that team, even if I'm not gonna pick them as because I do think they brought in some good transfers. I do think there is a chance, as much as it pains us to think about it, that they are actually a serious contender for the Big 12, but the most likely outcome with that team is always going to be them doing an approximation of what their College Station compatriots do. Sorry, you're about to say something.
No. I absolutely am hoping for the downfall and it just not going well. I don't know if I want them to like. I don't know if I want them to go like 8-4, or if I want them to like lose in the final game. To go like 10-2, and they lose the final game, and that makes them go 10-2, and they lose a chance at playing for the Big 12 championship, and then like not playing in that game keeps them out of the playoff. I don't know if I want that, or if I just want them to like start 5-2, and then kind of lose 2 more somewhere around there, and their hopes and dreams are killed early. I don't know if I want that, or if I want them to just like have to eat it late.
I feel like either is an acceptable scenario.
I think so.
I will be, if we break the, 16 years it's been since we beat them that joyous night at Old Robertson Stadium. If we finally are able to find a way to beat them, and this is the year we do it against our former DC and the team, I will be. You won't be able to tell me anything for like weeks afterwards.
Absolutely. I'm with you, bud.
And that happy note, buddy, why don't you take us home?
All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it. We are single-digit days away from Cougar football returning. Next week, we got some really cool stuff. Volleyball kicks up next week as well, so you can be on the lookout for that. Super exciting that Cougar sports are... I can't say quite in full swing yet, but it sure does feel like it. So follow along this season. We're looking forward to doing it. We're going to do some cool stuff with the premium feed over on Patreon. But if you have any feedback for us, you can find us on social media at SH Podcast on Twitter. You can find us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. You can find us over there. If you have sworn off social media, good for you. You can email us kind of the old-fashioned way, shpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to really have your opinions heard, you can find us on Patreon, SH Podcast on Patreon. If you just search SH Podcast, that's Pod, P-A-W-D. You search for us on there, you'll find us over there. We got some, like I said, some cool premium content coming out. I believe Sam and we haven't quite hammered it out yet, but we'll be doing some kind of post-game reactions, if not immediately after, depending on if we're traveling to a game or we're doing something like that. Sometime that weekend before a regular pod, you'll get some kind of content from us. So, but yeah, I think that's it. Sam, we are about 80 minutes in. What do we always say?
Go Cougs.